Hey, podcast listeners. Today we are going to talk about the fundamentals of being a secure base. So we're going to talk about parenting, but please do not tune out if you are either not a parent or not remotely interested in ever becoming one, because you have a parent in all likelihood. And so what we're talking about today will give you a lot of insight into your own childhood and understanding the dynamics that you yourself have experienced with your parents. So please hear me out. This is good stuff that we're going to talk about. So there are three distinct phases of what we call differentiation when a child is becoming more and more an individual and differentiating from the parent. And there's three that I'm going to highlight because they're ones that I see very commonly in my practice as a therapist. The first, well, I don't see this first one myself, but I hear lots of it, and it is very much implied. So that is toddlerhood, what we call the terrible twos, but that's actually a terrible name because they're great twos because that child is finally starting to see him or herself as an individual and create boundaries and be assertive with the parent. So it's actually a very important and necessary phase of development. Unfortunately, it can be terrible for a parent who is not educated in what to expect or how important this phase of development is, or a parent who has a lot of shame and is feeling rejected and maybe ascribes to some very backward parenting philosophies. So it's terrible for the parent. So that's the first phase, and we'll talk about that. The second one that I see a lot is when kids become around 10, 11, the preteens, and they are differentiating in a different way, starting to identify more with their peers than with their parents and what that does to the family dynamic. And then the last one I really need to focus on is when that young adult is now a senior in high school. Usually it starts around then and can go on into college, and how the dynamics change once again during that period. So those are three very acute periods of differentiation for most children. So how do parents respond? Well, I would say with the terrible twos differentiation period, a lot of parents will just try to quash the development or the differentiation of their child altogether. They will shame the child. Some will tell the child they're selfish, but they definitely, allege that they are disappointed with the child or that the child is bad in some way. And that creates a lot of shame. I've talked about this before in this podcast. Shame specifically that is associated with our anger, because in order for us to successfully differentiate, we have to display anger, and that is through boundaries and through being assertive. And so our anger often is associated with us being shameful or bad, and that is a template, unfortunately, that gets laid down very early in most of our lives and remains there for the duration of our life unless we intentionally do something to change it. So oftentimes at this stage of development, a parent, especially like a mother, will give the silent treatment in one way to quash the differentiation. And to a child, the silent treatment is not just silent treatment, it's abandonment. And that is the scariest thing a little dependent child could ever experience. So that successfully quashes that anger and that differentiation. But again, that creates that template for that child that their anger results in abandonment. So that is very unfortunate. The preteens, now this one, I find a lot of parents themselves feel rejected because their child is starting to really only care about their peers and not so much about the parent. And the parent feels rejected and often will reject the child back. And that breaks my heart to witness. They'll do this very suddenly, and the child goes from feeling accepted by that parent to rejected overnight, and it seems like it comes out of left field. And these children really struggle and don't understand why. Young adults, so senior year of high school and then college, this phase I see a lot where the parents will get very anxious. A lot of them will actually start developing a mental health issue around this time. Like maybe they will start developing severe anxiety or depression or bipolar disorder. And the reason they're so anxious or the reason they're struggling is they know that child is about to launch, they're about to leave the home, and they can't handle it. It feels like abandonment. And they're very scared of this, whether it is in their awareness or out of their awareness, as it often is. And what they'll also do is they'll attempt to reel that child back in somehow to, again, quash their differentiation. Now, this might be where they use that child as a confidant, where they suddenly start telling that young adult child all about the problems in their marriage with that child's parent. And for a child, this is very confusing because part of them enjoys this parent's confidence and feeling important to the parent, because we all need to feel important to our parents. And maybe this child never really felt very important until now. But it's also confusing because they're hearing all these horrible things about their other parent, maybe. It's ironic because they don't feel like they look to that parent as a confidant because the parent doesn't show a whole lot of interest in their life. And it's ironic that they're expected to show all this interest to the parent because it's quite upside down, actually, in how attunement and nurture are supposed to work. They will also reel in that child through other means, such as an accident, mental health crisis where they start depending on that child, or a physical crisis, maybe having a diabetic coma if they have diabetes all of a sudden, maybe divorcing the parent and relying, depending on that child suddenly, maybe making that young adult child suddenly feel very responsible for the welfare of the home, of their younger siblings, anything to kind of keep them reeled into the family system and what we call enmeshed, instead of allowing them to differentiate. I have also seen that when a young adult goes away to college, that the parent will attempt to make that child jealous of her relationship with the other sibling while she's away, in efforts to reel her back in and get them to be enmeshed once again. And then, of course, there's the proverbial guilt that we talk about that is kind of humorous. So I actually just heard something about this when I was having a root canal the other week. I was forced to listen, but it was actually very interesting. So the dental assistant was talking to the dentist about how whenever she calls her mom gives us this big guilt trip and will say things like, I haven't talked to you in so long. I can't believe you even remember I exist. I could have died. And it's been like a week. And then the dentist responded with, he experiences this specifically with his grandfather, and that every time he calls his grandfather, the grandfather will say, "Son, you never call me." And he'll say, "Grandpa, I am calling you right now." So as humorous as it can be to talk about how our parents and maybe grandparents guilt us, if we're honest, most of us, if we are parents, do feel rejected when our children differentiate from us. And it is scary. So let's talk about this. This is a human experience. Let's be honest. Let's be authentic. It's not shameful. If we have shame, this is when it gets activated big time. And we will not be able to be the stable attachment figure to our child that they need us to be. In fact, our level of shame will determine how we respond to our children's differentiation. Parents with the most shame will react most poorly to their child's differentiation, quashing or attempting to subvert it altogether. And the parents with the least shame will be the most supportive of their child's differentiation. So it is imperative that we understand our role in the child's life as what I call, and I'm not the only one, I didn't come up with this term, as a secure base. Now, this role begins in infancy, but it lasts a lifetime. So let's talk about it. When a parent learns to attune to their child consistently, now this doesn't mean perfectly, but what we call good enough, she becomes a secure base for that child. This is the person who gives the child a feeling of stability and security. Once a young child feels this, they are able to move away from the parent and explore the world around them because they are secure enough to do so. This is how their brains learn, by exploration and discovery. Conversely, children who do not develop this security from the parent will forfeit this exploration of their environment, and they will stay close to the parent, stuck at this incomplete stage of development. Even though it can feel like rejection to a parent when their baby doesn't want to be held by them, but would rather push away and explore, it's actually a good sign. It's a sign that the parent has given the baby some of that secure base security that she needs. The baby feels confident that when she gets tired or scared, she can come back to her secure base for comfort and to be held. And this is what she needs. Children need to differentiate from their parent, meaning to separate from the parent and develop their own sense of self, their own distinct interests, ideologies, thoughts, and experiences. Now, this can hurt parents who are emotionally immature and, again, feel rejected if their child doesn't want to stay close and do what they want to do. Some parents will call their child a brat because they think the child is being defiant when she doesn't want to do what the parent wants. This is when a parent needs to see themselves as a secure base, which is like a comfy sofa in a favorite room of the house that the child will always return to find comfort and love and security, even though she leaves the house often and eventually moves out. Just knowing that that comfy sofa is still there and that she can return to it at any time gives her comfort and peace. A secure base parent knows their child is not a brat when they refuse to do what the parent wants, but that it's actually a healthy sign for the child to be secure enough to differentiate, which includes displaying anger at the parent. This parent will say, "I know it's hard to stop playing because you love the sandbox. I don't blame you for being angry at me when I tell you to stop. It's okay to be angry with mommy. When we're angry, we use our words. We don't kick or throw sand. Mommy is going to pick you up and we're going to go home now because it's time to eat." So that mother will remind herself that even though her child doesn't show it, she is the most important person in his life as his secure base. And it is her job description as the mother to expect her child to be angry and push away from her, because this is a vital and necessary part of his development. I remember when Edie was 2 years old and I took her to the river with friends. I remember how hurt I felt that Edie was so interested in all the rocks and the water, but it seemed like I didn't exist. Some of the friends said that they would watch her while I went for a swim upstream. And so I went and I didn't even tell her I was going because honestly, I didn't think she would notice. After about 20 minutes when I returned, I was surprised because Edie came up to me and clung to me, not letting me go. She never did this. And I was shocked at how much she missed me. I never saw any evidence of how important I was. Looking back, I realized that little Edie had just learned to expect me to always be there as her secure base. She wasn't rejecting me when we got to the river and didn't interact with me. She was exploring her new environment, which is exactly what a toddler needs to be doing. I didn't understand this at that time that as her secure base, I was so important to her, even though she never showed it. I gave her the security she needed to trust that it was safe enough to explore in the first place. When our preteen differentiates, suddenly all they care about are their friends. They have all these new criticisms of us suddenly, the food we cook, the clothes we wear, our ideologies, the way we parent, and we get compared to other friends' parents, and we always are worse in their minds. This phase can be very painful for the strongest among us because it feels like chronic rejection, and it is. It is our job as parents during this time to remind ourselves that this is a natural and necessary stage of their development. Our job is to learn to have a healthy objectivity, allowing them to differentiate from us successfully by validating their feelings and their criticism while still being authoritative. For example, we might say, I don't blame you for hating the way I do things compared to Jenny's mom, but please do not disparage me. Help me understand more specifically what you don't like, and perhaps we can work together to find a solution that works for both of us. So when we learn to listen to the heart of our child's criticism, to really understand what they're saying, it teaches them that they matter. Even if we are unwilling to accommodate their wants, we can still understand them and validate their feelings and help them feel heard by us. Being consistently present for our child is an investment in her future. Having a parent who she can always rely upon will give her peace for the rest of her life. When she is launching from home, moving out and beginning a new life for herself, she needs to know we are there for her as a safety net through thick and thin. This gives her confidence and freedom from anxiety as she learns to trust herself and fly her wings. Now, is the job of a secure base parent exciting? Hell no. Can we look to our child to make us feel important? Another hell no. Our job is to create a life for ourselves, independent of our child, one filled with actual peers who can support us, friends, our partner, and community. We need to find meaning and purpose outside of our child because it is not okay to assign that role to her. That is not her job. Our role as a parent is to work ourselves out of a job, which is paradoxical. As a secure base, we often feel unnecessary, but the truth is we are utterly irreplaceable. An analogy might be the foundation of a house, which is the least sexy or appealing thing about a house and goes unnoticed until we realize there's a crack. And all of a sudden, nothing is more important. Now, today, Edie is 21 years old and living at home. Over the last few years, I have given up the expectation that she is my mini-me. I've learned to appreciate her differences from me, such as the way she views the world and her independence, having her own friend group and her own activities and interests. I've come to love that she is not me and respect that she is not me. But I've also learned to read between the lines, seeing the subtle echoes of my influence in the way she relates to things, and that delights me. The boring job of being her foundation as she comes and goes is actually life affirming, as I witness her grow stronger and more confident. The rare occasions she does appear to need me, such as after a painful breakup, I feel privileged that she solicits my support. At the end of the day, parenting is not about us, but our kids. if we lose sight of this, it will be unnecessarily painful for everyone. But as we can learn to inhabit this paradox, it creates a fountain of joy, peace, and life that overflows, watering gardens all around. Thanks for listening today. Please share this with a friend. Please subscribe to this podcast or my YouTube channel or both. And please give me an awesome review.